Hello everybody, my name is Blue and today we're on another episode of Tiny Island Resort. And this episode, well, we've done all the Oceania pack animals, so that's why this episode we are doing two animals for the island of Formosa or Taiwan or however you want to call it. And well, the two animals are, well, obviously the Formosan Black Bear or the Taiwanese Black Bear and the Chinese Pangolin, since they also live on Taiwan. And yeah, this was a really fun build because I did some research, and I actually did some research this time. I did some research on famous architecture in Taiwan, and I found some there's a lot of really interesting ones, but I just had to pick a couple because obviously the island is limited in size. So I just picked a famous architectural piece in the south and a famous one up north, and just we'll get to talking about those once we get there. But in the meantime, I quickly want to mention the free animal that we got a couple of days ago, which was the peccary. Honestly, I feel dumb not even guessing the peccary because it does make a lot of sense. I didn't even mention it in my prediction video, but it makes sense. I even said that it was going to be a clade or a family of animals that we already have, and well, we don't have a peccary, but we do have species from close enough family, right? I mean, they're not boars or pigs, but they're closely related to boars and pigs, so it makes sense. They have a very similar body plan, so the peccary is an awesome addition. But we're not doing peccaries today, although that may have been more logical, but I really fancied continuing on this build, and peccaries don't really fit in this zoo. They don't really live on any of these famous islands, so unfortunately the peccary will have to be left out for this zoo. It is what it is, I guess. But we do have the wonderful Formosan Black Bear and the Chinese Pangolin, so we'll talk about those instead. And well, they are actually really interesting animals because Formosan Black Bear it's a black bear from Southeast Asia, most specifically from Taiwan, but they're more commonly known as simply the Asian black bear, I think, because it's they do live across Asia. As far as I am aware, I think the Formosan Black Bear is a subspecies of the Asian black bear. So it's not its own species; it's a subspecies. But so the Formosan black bear is quite a common. Well, the Asian black bear is quite a common and well-known black bear. It's the Asian equivalent of the North American black bear. It is really beautiful, and it's very recognizable because it has this kind of band on its chest, like a white patch on its chest, and that makes it look really cute. And I must admit, even though it's a default animal from base game, it has a really good texture, and I think it really looks like Asiatic black bear or Asian black. I'm not sure what I think it's Asiatic black bear actually. Yeah, it is an Asiatic black bear, but this subspecies only lives on the island of Taiwan. That's why it's called the Formosan black bear or the Taiwanese black bear. But it's also sometimes referred to as the white-throated black bear. But it is a separate subspecies because obviously mostly on islands they do kind of diverge, but they haven't diverged enough to be its own species. I would say they are probably the most famous animal from the island, I guess, since it is probably the biggest predator. I should have looked that up, but I'm pretty sure it's the biggest predator of Taiwan as well. In the meantime, I am building the first building here in the south, which is the Dragon and Tiger Pagodas. These are two towers, a bit like two similar towers, but they both represent the tiger and the dragon. And it's right in the south of the island. It's on a lake. It's very beautiful. Definitely, if you go to Taiwan, I definitely recommend you to visit this. I try to represent it as good as possible on a relatively small scale, since I am building on a smaller scale. To fit with the island. Well, it doesn't fit the island scale, but to fit in nicely with the island, I guess. Not feel too out of place because the actual building is relatively big. But I had to scale it down a bit just for the sake of it. But it's It's a couple of stories tall, and it represents the dragon and the tiger, and in real life it actually has like a really cool dragon and tiger entrance. If I'm not too lazy with the editing, I may show a picture of it with like the cool entrance it has with like a lion and a tiger. If not, then just look it up. It's called the Dragon and Tiger Pagoda. And yeah, that's basically that building. And then up north is quite interesting because up north I was doing a bit of research about Taiwan, and I found the Jiufen Taiwan. Well, it's called Jiufen. I think I'm pronouncing it right. I probably butchered it. I'm not from Taiwan. I don't speak Mandarin Chinese, but it's called the Jiufen Old Street, and a lot of people refer to it as the Spirited Away town, since it looks very similar to the town from the Studio Ghibli movie Spirited Away. So that's also why it's a very famous touristic location when people visit Taiwan. And I do recommend, if you go to Taiwan, that you should definitely visit this as well. And what I'm building here is just a singular building. It's just a small piece of this whole very aesthetic town. If you want a real scale and idea of what the town looks like, you should definitely look at some images, because it's like a town on the mountain face. That's also the reason why I chose this, since it is next to a mountain, although the mountain isn't as high as the building. You know, I'm a bit limited with the kind of portions here, but yeah, it was really fun to build because it feels very different. It's a theme that I haven't really done before, but I really love the very cozy looking buildings, and apparently has a lot of shops, a lot of souvenir shops, like restaurants and stuff. I think this is supposed to be a restaurant, I'm pretty sure. This is like a diner or some cafe or restaurant. It looks very cozy. So yeah, if you want to visit it, it's called the Jiufen Old Street, or Jiufen Old Street, however you're supposed to pronounce it. But that aside, you know, yet again, I'm trying to build it on a smaller scale, but this one is a bit more difficult, so it's more of a one-to-one scale, this one. But that aside, I want to talk a bit more about the animals, since we do have some more animals. Well, actually one more, the Chinese Pangolin. And the Chinese Pangolin is, well, it's a species of pangolin, which it kind of looks like an armadillo. I think a lot of people would kind of get confused with it being an armadillo, but it definitely is not an armadillo. It's not related to armadillos. It's its own thing. It is definitely its own thing. I think when we actually go to the closest relative, and I have the wiki open here, I think the closest relative of the pangolins, well, living relative that is, because its closest relatives are extinct. Its closest living relatives are nothing like we have today. I think the carnivores, like the carnivora, are its closest living relatives. So it's a very distant and unique set of species, being the pangolins. And the Chinese pangolin is the one that we have in game, which is quite an uncommon species of pangolin in zoos. They have this, I think, in just a handful of European zoos. I think 1 or 2 zoos in Europe, or maybe 3, have the Chinese pangolin. In Asia, there's a small number of Chinese pangolins as well, so it's a very uncommon animal to find in captivity, which makes it special. I really enjoy it because, like I said, they're not like anything we have in game, right? And I think, if anything, having a second pangolin would be quite cool as well, now that I think about it. Although not necessary, I think having one pangolin is satisfactory. But pangolins are just really unique. They do have a convergent evolution with anteaters and aardvarks, and if you don't know what convergent evolution is, I mean, if you're into your biology, I'm sure you do know, or at least have heard of it before. But I'll just repeat myself, or at least I'll repeat a lot of the other biologists who have explained it. For some of you who don't know, or possibly a lot of you, you know, depending on how much you are into biology, but convergent evolution is the phenomenon where completely different clades who are unrelated, or at least not directly related, converge into a similar body plan. And the pangolin and anteaters and aardvarks are a very good example of this, since I mean, all animals are obviously related, but their common ancestor did not have an anteater body plan. their common ancestor had a completely different body plan. They diverged. Well, they diverged into these different groups that kind of created and kind of formed these very similar body plans, just because they live in different parts of the world, but they have a similar niche. So similar niche just kind of creates a similar body plan. I think the most famous example of convergent evolution is winged animals like bats and birds, since the common ancestor of bats and birds, which is a very ancient common ancestor, because, well, their common ancestor is the common ancestor of mammals and reptiles, basically, which is quite a while ago, but their common ancestor didn't look anything like bats and birds today. They looked like, well, some reptilian, mammalian kind of creature. But what happened is, after, well, millions of years of evolution, they would diverge, they would create their own clades, but they would both create a similar niche. So birds would find a niche in the skies, so they would create wings, so they have this very iconic body plan with, 2 legs and 2 wings. And the bats, who then also kind of converge into this very similar niche, they created the very similar body plan with 2 legs and 2 wings. Obviously, they're different looking, we all know they're different looking, but the body plan is very similar. And that's the same when it comes to anteaters and pangolins, and even aardvarks, since they do live on different parts of the world. Pangolins are from Asia, aardvarks are from Africa, and anteaters are from South America, but they all have a similar body plan because they have a similar niche, because they all feed on insects, specifically ants for a lot of these, and because it is just the most obvious, and it's just the it's just the best way of being built, like having a long nose with a long tongue, since that is the easiest way to get ants out of their nest. So that's why they all have a very similar body plan. Also, mostly big front claws to dig out insects out of the ground. That makes sense. And you can actually find these kind of convergent evolution phenomena in a lot of different places in nature, in a lot of different examples. Like I could name a lot. Even in the history, a lot of extinct species have a very similar body plan to a lot of extant species. For example, a lot of large birds like ostriches kind of have a similar body plan to the extinct ornithomimus, I could hardly pronounce it, and their relatives, which are a species of dinosaurs who are also bipedal with a long thin neck, because they have these similar niches, And even with living animals, you find it everywhere. I think the more you try to look for it, the more you really find these similarities. And I think that is really interesting. Another example that I just thought of randomly is the Tasmanian wolf and canines, since the Tasmanian wolf is a marsupial, but it's not a wolf at all, it's a marsupial, but it has a very similar body plans to other canines, just because it has this similar niche of, being a carnivore, right? So that's very interesting. And that's basically all I wanted to talk about. It's a bit of a evolution lesson. I think it's an interesting lesson. I could talk a bit more about these kind of lessons in other videos, but for now that will do. And, well, enjoy the rest of the speed build, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.